Hi everyone, my name is Kendrick and welcome to Travel and Live Free. Today I'm interviewing Christine, who traveled around the world for 3 years. So welcome, Christine.
Hi, thanks
So
for having me.
for sure. So Christine, um, what made you decide to travel long term? Like what made you decide to travel for 3 years?
Um, I think it was really being a couch surfer, being in couch surfing, which is an online travel community that I was introduced to in college, and then met a lot of different people from all walks of life and that traveled around, and they weren't necessarily any different than you and me. And so I decided when my friend invited me to her wedding in India, that would be that I decided to take the chance to go travel. And since I'd never also been to Asia before, and being Asian American, I thought it would be a good opportunity to explore more. And I kind of just decided to go as long as the money could last, and it ended up lasting a lot longer than I thought.
How much money did you save up to go on like a 3 year trip?
Initially, I saved maybe 11,000, and then left the U.S. with about maybe 10,000.
And then you lasted 3 years with $10,000?
So I lasted maybe about a year and a half, and then I ended up in Australia, and I was there for a work and holiday visa. And then I was able to replenish my savings a little bit some more. And then that was maybe a couple more months of traveling, and then give or take. So, well, yes, about a year and a half in Asia, and then about a year in Australia, and maybe about, I guess, 5 months or so in Asia, Southern Africa, and Mexico.
Gotcha. So you
Yeah.
took a year and a half and then you, when you were in Australia, and then you
Mhm.
traveling until pretty much the pandemic happened and you went back home.
No. This was a few years ago. So I had been traveling before, and then I ended up like working for a bit for maybe about 15 months or so, and then ended up traveling again for about 6 months, and then came back around came back to the US around Christmas, and then the pandemic hit in March. So
Okay, so you're kind of like in and out of the country then. So you'll travel,
yeah.
and then when you run out of money, you go to Australia, you work, and then you travel again,
Yeah.
run out of money, back home, work again for.
Yeah. um yeah, I mean, I it didn't necessarily pan out that, or didn't necessarily plan it, but I realized that traveling has kind of become a lifestyle than necessarily and a passion. So I decided that to prioritize it in my life.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I've done the same thing. But
Yeah.
so the first time you did it, like, how did you feel? Were you scared, like when you pulled the trigger to go on like your first long-term travel journey? Because before you were just probably just going on vacations and stuff, right? So
Right. I mean, I was like a little bit nervous, but I think it was more of like the adrenaline and the excitement of the unknown that really motivated me more than just like the fear.
gotcha. So you weren't driven by fear; it was mostly by the excitement of like what's coming.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
And then what made you decide to go super long term? Because you said you didn't plan to travel that long, right? It was only because,
right.
so like what kept you going? Like, did you say, I want to travel for a year and a half, or was it just like you kind of just went with how you felt and like see where it would take you?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I did. I just kind of like went with what I felt like, and what I met like so many interesting people, and I decided um, it was like to give it time to like really enjoy and like immerse myself in the different places I was in. And it wasn't, I guess, the way that I traveled, it wasn't necessarily about how many destinations, how many places I would see, or how many things I would do, but it ended up being more about the people I met, and about like um, the experiences I had, and how maybe like how intense the experiences were versus how shallow they could be, you know?
Gotcha. So you were going for depth of like
Yeah,
experience. Uh,
exactly.
and like what was your route? Like where did you start and like where did you go like along the way and where did you kind of like end up? So let's start with like when you first finished your wedding, the wedding you went to in India, and like
Right.
what was your travel route and like where did you go along the way?
Okay. So I was started in southern India for my friend's wedding, and then afterwards I was dropped off at a couch surfer's place, and then went a little bit north, and then I heard it was about it was getting closer to the end of trekking season, so I went up north to go trekking in like the Himalayas and like in Leh Ladakh area, and then kind of went back south west, and then I kind of did a number four around the country of India. So I went a little bit southwest, then end up more southeast, or no, not southeast, more like northeast, and then went from I spent about maybe 5 months in India, which is a very long time,
Yeah.
and but I enjoyed it, and I ended up in Nepal afterwards, and I flew over Tibet, but didn't go to Tibet, into China. Then from China, I went to Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, um, like Southeast Asia a little bit. And then it was in Cambodia that I basically kind of made the decision that I wanted to take whatever I had left to move to or to go to Australia to work, do the work and holiday visa, and and hopefully make my money last until my first paycheck in Australia, which ended up working out. And then I stayed in Australia and did about or two different jobs in Australia. Stayed there for the full year, and then ended up going back to Asia for a little bit, and then ended up going to Southern Africa. Flew to Spain, and then actually came back to the U.S. for about 2 months, and decided I wasn't. It was like too much of a reverse culture shock, and then ended up in Mexico for about 3-4 months.
And then you went back home again too, so you can go back to work.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of job did you do in Australia when you were doing your working holiday there?
Yeah. So my background is in wildlife sciences, or in environmental work. So when I was in Australia, I applied to stuff to hopefully kind of further my career. And I ended up finding a job in Gold Coast, Australia, working at a place called SeaWorld, which is not actually related to the one in America, as a education officer. And so what that meant was I educated Australians and tourists about marine life, like sharks and stingrays, polar bears, seals, and yeah, about marine life in general. And then after that, I was originally going to go to Melbourne to maybe look for just bartending work. But then I was also applying to animal stuff, and ended up getting in contact with someone who had a contact at another animal place, and ended up in Darwin, Australia, which is in the Northern Territory of Australia. And it was to work as a crocodile handler and educator.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely a wild experience.
Um, you're also a bartender, so do you
Yeah.
do that, like along your way when you were traveling, like some bartending to keep you afloat a little?
Um, Not really until I got to Australia. So when I was in Australia, I did do like two different bartending jobs while I was doing the crocodile job. So that was an interesting dynamic to work with animals day and night.
Yeah, that is awesome. Like, were you a bartender in the U.S. first, like when you were studying, I guess, to get your undergrad?
Not necessarily. I was more of a server, and I did have like significant amounts of experience in hospitality, and then was beginning to learn more about bartending. But then I left for traveling, and then when I went to Australia, I just kind of like was like, I know some things about bartending, and just winged it, and then ended up going down that path as well.
Right. In the U.S., before you traveled, were you already working in the wildlife like area before you traveled, or did you go straight to travel after you finished school?
Yes. So my background is in wildlife sciences, and I have worked in different organizations with wildlife. So I've worked with like bears. I've worked with what else have I worked with? Birds. I've worked with what else? Like different types of birds, desert bighorn sheep. And so my background is, mostly wildlife, sometimes plant work, environmental things in general.
Gotcha. And then did you get bored of doing it? That's why you traveled, or what is it that like made you pull the trigger? Or you're like, you know what, I don't like this life. I'm gonna go travel instead of like, being in the U.S. and chasing that rat race and that kind of lifestyle.
Right. Um, well, besides, all the couch surfers I mentioned, I I decided, like, I mean, when you study wildlife, and you can only look at wild animals from books for so long, and like, I could see wild animals in the U.S., but the ones that was most excited about were always abroad and more like exotic and more just like remote. And so I really wanted to get connected with the wildlife and the wildlands, to really, I guess, to really solidify like my purpose in my wildlife science work. And I mean, it was amazing to kind of like live in these spaces where these animals did as well, and also like camp and trek and do all sorts of outdoor activities to be closer to nature.
So when you were traveling, you were specifically like checking out different wildlife in those different regions of those countries then?
Yeah, I mean, I did a balance of between like cities and nature as well. I mean, depending on the seasonality, and also like where I was when I was traveling. I didn't really plan any certain itinerary, so it was more of like what locals and other people recommended me, or if any locals wanted to, show me a place, or we wanted to go on a road trip, or um, things like that.
And then for accommodations when you were traveling, did you specifically like just do couch surfing, or did you stay at hostels too, or like those other places?
Yeah, I mostly did couch surfing like the vast majority, and when I couldn't, I did like hostels, and yeah, mostly just hostels. I think, like, instead of hotels or anything, just because for me, I didn't prioritize the accommodation. It was a place to put my stuff and to rest my eyes for a little bit, but it's more about, like putting myself out there and seeing what was out there.
Were you going out a lot like when you were traveling, or did you stay into at times? Because it sounds like you're go 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 go.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, for sure. I mean, like, you can't be go 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 for like 3 years straight. So, um, it is, I guess, different for couch surfing hosts to really understand that. Sometimes I just need like a few days to just like do laundry and just do normal human things, like just kind of relax and chill, and maybe catch up on emails or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Um, you said to me when we were chatting on Facebook that you got some backlash from your family when you did this.
Yeah.
What kind of backlash did you get from your family? Like, did they not approve of you traveling long term, or what was the backlash that you experienced?
I don't know if I would necessarily phrase it as backlash as so much as just they didn't fully support me. I mean, they couldn't really stop me. Like, I mean, I was kind of living. I mean, an adult, so I'm able to live on my own money and make my own decisions. They weren't supportive because it was outside of the norm of what they were used to, in the sense of you go to school, you get a job, maybe you go back for more school, then you work the 9 to 5, you get married, you have the 2.5 kids and have a mortgage and all that stuff, and it didn't follow that American dream in their mentality. So in their mind, when I was traveling, it was almost they considered it, I was just playing around, and it wasn't like a chance for me to do more in-depth like self-reflection, or like understand more of the world. It was more of like vacation, but like for far too long.
Did you feel like you were escaping life by doing that long term travel, or did you feel like it was the right thing to do? You know, like, is there a part of it
Hmm.
that it was kind of like an escape, from like the 9 to 5 stuff because you didn't like the 9 to 5 stuff, or did you feel like it was like I'm not escaping from anything. This is what my life is.
I mean, I think it's a bit of both, in the sense that maybe at the beginning it was like, it's an escape of the 9 to 5, because I never really saw myself adapting fully to the 9 to 5 lifestyle. Like maybe, I mean, I'm not saying that I can't, because I have obviously like lived and worked in Australia, or not Australia, in the US to make some money, but it was definitely not the end all be all to me. I wanted to see what life was like elsewhere in the world, and see if there was maybe another place in the world I wanted to live, or is there a more balanced life somewhere else, or what more could I not see from like a 2 week vacation that's typically allotted to Americans.
Right. So what do you want out of life? Like it's so you don't want the 9 to 5, but what do you want then?
Ooh, that is hard. I mean, is it bad that I want it all? Like I want to have the ability to live an independent life, but to live a life that's financially sustainable. First of all, like not that I'm not able to sustain myself, but travel lifestyle, it can get tricky sometimes depending on how you go about things. But I think that I don't know. I want to find a more of a balanced lifestyle. Like I feel like here in the U.S. we we focus way too much on work and like no play, or like very limited amount of play, and then you just follow all these milestones to the grave. So to me, I feel like there needs to be more balance, and you need to enjoy life, but not enjoy life only at retirement.
Gotcha. And what is your plan for sustainable finances? Because to sustain that lifestyle that you want to have, do you have like an idea of what you want to do?
Ooh, well, that all changed because of the COVID-19. My original plan was to move to New Zealand, but since most of the countries in the world hate us now because Americans have the highest rate of COVID, so that basically I had to reroute my plan. And currently, I will be starting a new job in California as a wildland firefighter.
Oh, that
So yeah, so that will hopefully, I'll be able to work on my savings. And I mean, I'm not really sure how this COVID thing is going to work out. So if anything, like that is my way of kind of getting the adrenaline rushes and the learning experiences, and the, I guess in some small way, like the traveling that I was hoping for, in that I can't do right now.
where do you live right now? You live in the middle of US, right?
Yeah, so currently I'm in around like Chicagoland, USA.
Okay. And then you're gonna move to the West Coast, live in California.
Yeah,
So do a little bit of traveling to a different part of the US.
yeah.
And you have a pretty exciting job from what it sounds like. So you're not gonna be doing that. I think what's nice is that you do have that background in wildlife. So it sounds like wherever you went, like abroad, as long as you were in a westernized country, it sounds like you kind of were okay job wise. Like you can always find a wildlife related job.
I mean, yes and no. Like it was surprisingly, like I had surprisingly good luck, I think, in Australia, because when I arrived in Australia, they would look at my resume and they were far more impressed than being in the US with my resume. People
Really?
would be like, I don't know. I don't know if you have enough experience. I'm like, how many, like, they want you to have like 10 years of experience to be an internship, or to get an internship in the US. But
Yeah.
like in Australia, they're like, oh, no worries, mate. Looks good. So it was surprising, like, because I had like, legal paperwork to work in Australia, it wasn't an issue. But the conservation field is difficult because it's such a dream job. It's such an idealistic job. Like not everyone can work with sharks and stingrays and crocodiles. Like, and it's because there's such, like, so many people want to do it. Like it doesn't necessarily always pay that well, like especially like in the US, because like minimum wage and whatnot. But Australia had much better minimum wage, and so things worked out much better in Australia.
Yeah, it sounds like you got paid pretty like decent, and then you
Yeah,
had fun while doing it. Uh,
yeah,
you also got a job where you couldn't get a job in the US, which is kind of ironic. Um,
yeah.
I think maybe being an American too was kind of like they made you think. It made them think, oh wow, we got like a wildlife person working for us from the US. That's kind of like different too, right? So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like for tourist industry, maybe it was like it helped and diversify, you know, their like how their image to the public was, you know.
Yeah, and you had an American accent too, so it's like
Right. They're
yeah,
like, ooh, from Hollywood, you
yeah,
know, like
yeah,
all the American movies.
yeah. That's right. Um, okay, so before you left to travel, did you plan to save up money? Like, what did you do to save up money as fast as possible? Because obviously, if you want to travel for a long time, you need to have sufficient amount of money to make it happen, right? So,
Right.
what did you
I
do?
mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like that mentality is limiting though. Like, people think that you need to have certain amount of money, and like I generally don't recommend that mentality because in people's minds, you'll never have enough money. You know, like the same thing with like, you know, people and their work style. Like, oh, but if I work more and I work more and I work more, then I'll have enough money eventually one day to do something, you know, frivolous that's not necessarily, you know, contributing to your future. Maybe I don't know, but like I definitely knew that I needed, you know, obviously some kind of um, financial cushion. So um, my friend told me maybe a little bit less than or little like about a year in advance that she was getting married in India, and so she was. I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm giving myself the time to work, and I worked at a zoo as a research intern for like, you know, full time, and also I worked as a server at a restaurant, and that was the place that I also like transitioned to do more of like a server bartender, but mostly serving. And that was like mm, I worked as like a waitress at maybe about like two restaurants, and also worked at a zoo. So I definitely tried to hustle during that time to save up some money.
So you had two jobs then, and then you were hustling hard with the two jobs.
Like I would say about three jobs, maybe almost like 3, 4 jobs, because I was actually also starting a environmental education organization at the same time. So I
Yeah.
basically never slept around that time. I was very ambitious around then.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I did the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had three jobs when I before I took a year off to go backpacking too. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I didn't sleep much either, and I
right.
gained a lot of weight, which is terrible.
Yeah, work hard, play hard, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not doing that again, but like,
Yeah.
but it's too
It's
much.
definitely not sustainable, that's for sure.
Yeah, but like that final push to go before you leave, I think you had enough motivation to do it.
Right. And
Uh,
the thing is, like, you know, people just have to go and, you know, just take take however much you save and see how long you go for, or like, you know, try for 2 weeks and the next time try for 3 weeks, and you know, try for longer, and you know, eventually you'll, you know, people might end up like me or in you, you know.
well, I mean, when I did it, I've never even stayed in a hostel before, let alone like backpack. It was like
Oh wow.
I went all in like 100%. So
Okay.
yeah, like I got scammed a lot my first 2 weeks traveling because
Oh my god,
I didn't go
no.
in. Yeah,
People were like, how much is this backpack? $200. You're like, okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't not that bad, but you know, there was
Okay.
bad situations where like they're like, yeah, it's $50 per person in a taxi, you know, or something like stupid.
Oh no, the taxi scam.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
Yeah.
learned eventually, and I
Yeah.
became an expert like at
I
doing.
mean, sometimes you gotta learn the hard way. People do not learn until you're like, oh, all my money's gone.
Yeah, I had to turn off my empathy, and like this, like taxi drivers were not humans to me anymore. Like after I
Yeah.
like
Oh
long.
gosh. Yeah. Yeah,
What?
they're definitely aggressive.
Yeah. What travel tips do you have for people? Like, so, okay, so let's start with like how to save money on flights. What did you do for that? Like,
Ooh, flights. So how to save money on flights? Don't take them. I mostly traveled on land, which is much slower. But like if you I guess like weigh the cost, and if you have the time, that's the thing. Like I feel like traveling oftentimes narrows down to you might have time, but you have no money. But then if you have money, then you have no time. You know, like if you have time but no money, then travel slowly. So then I traveled buses, hitchhiking, trains. Like I traveled over land like very slowly, and I mean, it's also technically more environmentally friendly because there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of carbon emission from flights. So I mean, like, obviously I did fly. I can't get to Asia without flying. So I mean, do what you can to in terms of juggling, like, or like doing your research. Do it on different computers. Do it incognito. Clear your cache. You know, because people will research the same flights and it'll get more and more expensive. You know.
So when you travel, the three most expensive expenses you have is transportation, accommodation, and food, right? So what about
Yeah.
accommodation? How did you save money on accommodation? Was it just purely couch surfing, or did you do anything else to save you money?
I mean, besides couch surfing was like a massive, you know, like lifesaver in that sense because it introduced me to like friends as well as provide accommodation. But also, I would say, you know, price compare what different hostels are offering, or you know, see if you can hustle a deal if you want to do like a longer term stay. Like if you know, if you just want to create a base somewhere for a week, just be like, hey, I know that this is the cost, but is there any way that you could, you know, cut me a deal? Or like I know in one trek I was able to cut a deal being like, if I eat lunch and dinner or if I eat dinner and breakfast here and I pay for it, can I stay here for free? And they said yeah. So just talking to the people and, you know, just trying to be mindful that everyone's also a human. You know, everyone does need to eat, but you know, doing what you can helps.
Gotcha. And did you ever get harassed when you were doing couch surfing?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, if you're a single female in couch surfing, it's not like you're definitely going to get harassed. So I'm not saying that like every person obviously harassed me. It was just like, but it definitely also, I guess in that sense, I'm thankful to have my, and obviously not all Americans are like this, but like as an American female, I've kind of developed a more direct personality in addressing those kind of things. So if they, you know, got out of line, I would, you know, and also like the thing with couch surfing is you could always leave. Like if someone gets weird, leave. Like I had money to go to a hostel or find another host. I never felt like I was obligated to stay anywhere.
Was it a
And I also had a tent. So worst comes to worst, I'll like leave and go camp in the forest or something.
Did you when you got harassed, was it a specific country that you got more harassed than others, or is it like all over the place?
No, all over the place.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a female friend that also got harassed, but she was really direct about it too. Like when she handled it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about volunteer work? Did you do any volunteer work? Like work away or something, or?
Not really. That wasn't really my focus. I mean, I did an internship in Taiwan, which is kind of like volunteer. That one was like kind of like it was still environmental related. It was to help the like different nature education areas communicate their like their like environmental areas, but like in English. So we like a group of foreigners helped create English websites and like, you know, take photos and kind of advertise these areas in exchange for internship experience.
Got it. So my Zoom is telling me that it has 7 minutes left before it shuts down. So
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you some rapid fire questions before we wrap this up.
Sure.
How
Okay.
did you save money on food? Like, what did you do for food?
I mean, I'm vegetarian, so that kind of helps in terms of, you know, like saving from buying like a lot of meat purchases. Cooking at couchsurfers homes is also more highly recommended. You know, cooking in bulk and, you know, storing it and stuff, and just kind of like treating it like, you know, I mean, it's the same way like when you're at home, you cook at home and you'll save money than eating out, but not necessarily. Like some places you just eat out. You just have to be more mindful about what you buy.
Yeah, I think like Thailand, for example, is cheaper to eat out than cook your own
Oh
food.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's like $1 a meal. So
Yeah. Yeah, I was when I was in Colombia, I remember it was cheaper to eat out too than to cook my own food. So I never.
yeah. Right. But then it also depends on what you're eating too, right? And like being vegetarian, like when I was in Colombia, it was only like arepa, which is like cheese and bread. I'm like, I can't eat any more cheese and bread all day long. Like, you know.
Yeah, the arepa doesn't taste good either, too. So
And then it was that or corn, which I loved. It was like the grilled corn.
yeah.
Oh, it was good.
So you went to South America too?
Yeah, I mean, not on this trip. Like before.
Like outside your long-term travels, you went
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
I see, I see. Um, so when people are scared to travel, it's usually because of a few reasons. So the first one is I'm gonna ruin my career.
yeah.
Uh, so let's start with that. How would you address that? Like, how can you stop yourself? How do you not ruin your career, or essentially?
Well, I mean, I feel like traveling really builds your character, and like, I mean, people don't really. I'm not okay. This is not everybody, obviously, but people don't like typically know themselves like in their 20s, 30s, even 40s. Like people don't give themselves the chance and the time to grow and to like really get to know themselves. And so, if anything, if you don't know yourself, then you're not going to be confident in the things that you do and the career that you're following. And I mean, I feel like that, like my passion and my like, go getterness, my drive is really can be translated from my travels into what I do in terms of my career. Like, yeah, there's gaps in my resume. My my field often like is oftentimes like a more seasonally based field. Like, I mean, a lot of field work is in the summertime, and sometimes there's a lot more like part-time work and stuff like that. So like the gaps, I mean, I have to kind of eat, but like when I go through the interview, I can generally like win them by, showing them my character, and, you can explain all the different stories of like how your travel helps make you and adds to your experience and what you bring to the company and the team.
So you just charm your way into the interview.
Exactly, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've done that. It works. uh, yeah, we're similar personality type, right? So
Yeah, okay.
yeah, like everything you're saying makes sense to me. But
Right.
the other fear that people have is safety, right? So
Yeah,
for women, it's like
yeah,
like my girlfriend and my sister always say, "Oh, I'm gonna go to this country and someone's gonna kill me or rape me," right? So it's like, what's
right.
how do you get over that?
Well, the thing is, like, statistically, you can get, you know, hurt, killed, raped, injured anywhere in the world if you're a woman. Like, it's just dangerous being a woman out with a bunch of men anywhere. Like,
Yeah,
Chicago has like a high crime rate, but I'm
yeah,
still
yeah,
here, right?
yeah.
So, like, people are afraid of coming to the US. They're like, everyone has guns, right? Like, no, that's not the case. So you can't just go into countries just assuming like what you see on TV and everything that you hear from the media is accurate. Like, everything in the media is going to be highly skewed towards violence and crime and bad things that are happening. Like, if you are street smart, which you can't really necessarily learn, you kind of have to gain it by being on the streets, right? And like, you can't just be afraid of everything, right? Like, I mean, we're kind of seeing this now with this pandemic. People are getting tired of being so safe with the pandemic and going out anyways. Like, that's not necessarily great, but here we are. But I would say, be mindful. Like, be careful with your drinks and food and your company. But don't let like what other people tell you stop you from living your life, because like the more that you ask people, they're gonna be like, oh, that country is not safe for women. I'm like, so there's like men specific countries that I can't go to? Like, what the hell is that about?
Yeah,
Like, that is not okay.
yeah, it's all
So
dudes.
right. So I mean, I also like I carried like a Leatherman, or a pocket knife, like when I was like hitchhiking and stuff to just like have a backup. I mean, never had to use
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a really good tip.
it. Yeah.
We have a minute left, so how can people like find more about you or like reach out to you to talk to you if they want you have some questions about how to travel?
Yeah. They can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Christine, or at Christine Wild Photography on Instagram. Yeah. So Christine Wild Photography.
All right. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Christine, for doing this interview.
Yeah. Thanks, Kendrick.
All right. And